This is Mark Hubbs with Era's Gone Bullet Molds. Today we're going to be looking at the Crossen Hazard Cartridge making kit. And I know I got the title of his product messed up there, but basically it's essentially a set of 3D printed molds that recreates the Hazard compressed powder skinless cartridge of the Civil War era. And stick with us and I'll show you how I've made some using this new product. Hazard was one of many contractors who provided revolver ammunition during the Civil War. However, theirs were unique in that they were made out of a compressed powder charge that was waterproofed. Had no paper or skin to hold that powder together. The compression as it was made did all that, and plus the coating of typically a nitrocellulose type compound on the outside kept it waterproof and also provided more ignition and held the cake together. So it's very unique in that regard, and John has come up with a set of tools. They're essentially 3D printed molds. You can do one cartridge at a time that will allow you to compress a powder charge into that cake. And it's very ingenious, and I'll go through the steps on how I did it with my set. I have both a 44 and a 36 caliber set. There's some things that probably that I would do a little bit different compared to his instructions, but overall it's ingenious and it produces a perfect copy of the original cartridge. The only thing that you'll find, although it's tedious, just like paper cartridges, it's just slow in that you can only do 6 at a time, and it takes about 24 to 48 hours of drying time for each round of 6 that you do. So you'd have to build up over several days to get you enough to go out to the range. But if you need a super authentic cartridge that's a little bit different from the paper versions, you can't beat that. And here is 6 that have been prepared already. And I know you can't see this very well, but you'll see a close-up later on in the video. And like I said, the only thing that I found that was bothersome is that you are slow and that you can only do 6 at a time. Tediousness is probably no more than paper. It's just a slow process due to the drying time. But let's get into it and you'll see the process for making these. This is the base kit for the Crossen cake mold cartridge making set. Well, that's a mouthful, isn't it? It can be used with any caliber. It includes a bag of dextrin, a silicone mixing bowl, a packing dowel, a mixing paddle, if you want to call it that, a water bottle, and 6 44 caliber cartridge tubes. I'll talk about each one of these items as we go through the production process. There's a 44 caliber kit and a 36 caliber kit, and each one of these kits includes 6 molds with an associated O-ring and hose clamp, a little funnel, and a compression cap. And here's one of the 44 caliber molds opened up, so you can see the cavity inside. And there's also the blue color used for 36 caliber molds. The propellant mixture used for these type cartridges is 4F powder, and then 5% by weight of dextrin and 5% by weight of water. So we'll start off, to make this simple, we'll start off with 100 grains of 4F powder, and I'll weigh it out here on this electronic scale. Of course, you could mix as much as you would like at one time, just keeping that same ratio with 100% powder, 5% dextrin, and about 5% water. We'll discuss the water a little bit more in a few minutes. Dextrin is essentially just toasted cornstarch. It's used as the binder to hold all the powder together into the mold. And of course I'm trying to get 5% or 5 grains here. Didn't quite make it. Got to get a little bit back out. I'll get it down to essentially 5.4 grains within this 100 grains of powder. The provided water bottle with this thing is great. It's will allow us a very precise single drop per squeeze. And the instructions say a 5% weight of water. However, I've found it's not quite enough. I really needed more like 7 to 8 grains in my experimenting with this. The next step is to thoroughly incorporate the water into the mixture. And you don't want too much water, you don't want a slurry, but at the same time it will have to stick together once you compress it in the mold. And that's when I found that really about more than 5% is needed, usually 6-7% possibly. And you mix this until it looks like coarse ground cornmeal essentially. It shouldn't look like a putty or a paste. And also I found the foam applicator that was provided really didn't work that well. It was a nice gesture to include it. Also, but a popsicle stick really works better than anything. So the little silicone bowl is just really too flimsy. I had to put it inside the bowl from my scale to give it some rigidity. I think I'll find something else to mix in later to make it that a little bit easier. Here are the two halves of a 44 caliber mold. They just push together. They're identical. It's not a right or left. And then a O-ring holds them together while you start the process. You'll also need a hose clamp to really hold them together well while you pack in the content. And I accidentally tried this without the hose clamp the first time. Of course, it expanded, didn't work. Put the little funnel on the top, and then you start to put in your mixture. Now I did it by sight. I filled it up to the top, and I checked it off and on until it got to the top of the mouth of the mold essentially. I used the little dowel that came with it. It was pretty handy to get it packed in. Like I said, I checked it. And notice it needs a little bit more, so I added a little bit more. Now I'll tell you why this technique does not really work well in a few minutes, and why I'll probably do an alternate version next time. When I think it's level, I'll pull the funnel off and then scrape off the top flat, and then get the compression cap started into the mold. You're simply just starting the compression cap in. It takes too much pressure to actually push it all the way to square on the top, so we'll use a press. In this case I have a reloading press. I just have an odd sizing die in there that I can use that'll have a firm bottom and top so I can press, and you really put some pressure on it and compress that powder charge. I suspect you could also rig up a drill press to do the same thing. You just need pressure to push it in firmly. Now, I waited 24 hours before I took the molds apart, and it seemed to work very well for the 44. I had a different experience with the 36 the first time, which we'll see in a minute. But here the mold comes apart, and the cake mold, if you want to call it that, or the pellet comes right out, and the form is very nice. Had no trouble getting them out. However, on the 36, after 24 hours, they came apart. They broke on me on the side of the mold. I decided to weigh the fully dried pellets, and this is where I discovered there's an issue when you try to fill the molds just by sight. You can see there is a vast difference between the weights of the pellets. And this has to be because as I hand packed them, I was applying different amounts of pressure on each one as I loaded them. This is especially apparent on one of these last ones. You can see this one, that's 22. The next one will be over 33 grains. And obviously I can't use that in a Model 60 Army. I end up using that with a Dragoon bullet to go on one of my Dragoons. Next time I'll just put the entire mold on the scale, tear it to 0, and this add the appropriate amount of mixture to get my 24 grains. John Crossen recommends a nitrocellulose glue to attach the bullet to the pellet and also to waterproof the outside of the the pellet itself or the entire cartridge. Didn't have that on hand, but I did have a can of nitrocellulose airplane dope, the old-fashioned stuff they used to use with balsam and paper wing aircraft. It seemed to work just fine for this purpose, and it's probably very similar to what would have been used at the time for this product. This is where the black quick loaders come in. This is simply a way to hold on to the bullet as you apply the glue and attach the pellet. You can see here, I'll just take a little brush. I have these disposable brushes, and put a goodly amount on the bottom of the bullet, because the powder cake will soak up a little bit, so you want to make sure there's enough there to keep the bond. Position the cake on it and just set it aside and let it set up. There's only 6 of the quick loaders in the kit, but what I've found is that a 44 mag or a 45 Colt cartridge case, empty one, works just as well. And sometimes, if you're like me, you probably have lots of these on hand. And also a 38 special or a 357 case will work just fine for your 36s. After a few minutes, I was able to go ahead and start painting the outside of the cases after the bullet had set pretty well onto the cake. And I'm just putting a thin coat, or just, it's really not thin, this stuff is sort of thick, 1 coat on the outside of the cake. I think he recommends 2 coats to give it that shiny look like the originals. And I may go back and do another one, but I think this is probably enough for my purposes. They're not going to be sitting up that long or stored that long. I want to make sure I get a good ignition, so I'm going to try with just 1 coat to start off with. Go Crossen. I'll put a link to John Crossen's website in the description to this video, so you can see all the products that he offers. You probably remember him also from the machine he created to do paper cartridges. I have to say that these were not given to me. This is an unbiased review. I purchased these from John at regular price to see how they work. And I can see myself making a batch of these every once in a while just for fun. And I'll be out at the range shooting them. You'll also see, I'll also link to a video of me shooting some of these. You'll see that pop up. The ignition was perfect. The only thing I would hope to do get some chronology or chronograph results, but I couldn't get my chronograph to work with these loads. Maybe next time. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to go to www.airasgonebullets.com to see all my bullet mode offerings. Thanks.